so much what we've already covered. Seems like you've got a pretty good mastery of how to fly, but we're going to focus on emergency procedures today. So it'll be a little bit of a pop-up game. My goal for you today is to kind of push your judgment and decision making and just see how you react to an emergency that could apply to a high performance and complex airplane. Okay?
Okay.
So while we're going through the lesson here in the ground portion, just get your sim started up. We're going to be at Lakeview, Lake County again. That's
Okay.
Lima Gila Victor. Parking spot 1 in the normally aspirated default Bonanza. If you get the black square analog down the road, I've been flying it for a couple hours now so far, and it seems like it's great from an instructional standpoint. I am definitely going to use it moving forward with other students. All right, so let's get into it. When it comes to failures for a turbo, before we get to them, let's talk a little bit about the turbo functionality. Matt, can you kind of talk me through how a turbocharger works?
Turbocharger uses the waste exhaust to help power some turbines to increase the power in the engine.
That's right. Nice job. So in order to do so, it uses that exhaust gas. In order to regulate how much exhaust gas actually goes to that compressor, there's an additional piece of hardware in the turbocharger that's used. Do you know what that's called?
A wastegate.
Wastegate. Nice job. What does the wastegate do for us?
The wastegate, that's just what you said, it limits the amount of exhaust that you're pushing into those turbines.
That's right. It's a gate. It's a valve, and it lets some of that hot exhaust gas go overboard, just like it would for normally aspirated, and then some of it goes to the actual turbine itself. Why do we have a wastegate?
You have a wastegate so that you don't get an excessive amount of exhaust going in there, and it's a way of regulating all that input that's going in.
That's right. So what would happen if we did have excess exhaust gas going to the turbine? What are the two big things that you might see when it comes to issues with your turbocharger?
Well, the big key issue that you're going to worry about is the heat, because you're going to start warping all the metal there in the fins on those blades.
That's right. Those fins are pretty strong. They're either like ceramic or titanium, something that's meant to survive going really fast, really high temperature, like a turbine and a jet engine. But eventually it's going to hit its limits.
Affirmative.
So nice job with that.
Affirmative.
We could turn him down, by the way. Just hit his user volume down to 0. Cool.
No worries.
All right, I'm going to keep pressing. So with all that said, you've kind of talked through the turbo failures there. So for you in the cockpit, let's say we're flying along. We're climbing up to, let's say, 15,000 feet, and you've got a turbocharged engine. Let's say all of a sudden you're holding standard atmospheric pressure, 2992 on manifold pressure, and then suddenly you hear a loud pop, and you look at your manifold gauge, you check your engine instruments like a good pilot, and you see your manifolds all of a sudden 14 inches, 15 inches. What do you think's happened here?
I'm not sure.
So when a turbocharger fails, one of two things can happen. One, it can shear, because there's a drive shaft there that connects the turbine section to the compressor.
Right.
That can break. Some of them are designed to do exactly that. If your turbine starts to fail or produces a lot of force in order to prevent additional damage to the engine, that is meant to shear. Or the turbine's going to eat itself, that's fine, you'll pay for it, but your engine's going to continue to work. At that point, though, the moment you do that, you now have a normally aspirated engine, right? There's nothing compressing the air anymore. You just have a normal Bonanza, normal piston engine like you'd have in a Cessna.
Right.
So suddenly you've lost a lot of power because you had sea level pressure going to the cylinders. Now you only have 14 inches. You're up at 15,000 feet at this point.
Right.
What are a couple things that you would do once you realize you've lost engine power?
Well, I'm going to descend.
That's right. Nice job.
I'm going to adjust for the heat, the excess heat.
Mm-hmm. And how would we manage that excess heat with some things you could do in the cockpit?
I could enrich the mixture.
That's a good one. What else?
I could. Yeah, I'm not sure.
So you can enrich the mixture.
Yep.
Bear in mind, depending on your altitude, you might not be able to do that because you might lose more power. So that's one way. The other one is bring the throttle back. Third item we talked to it. Is there a valve or something that you can open on the underside of the airplane to help get rid of some heat?
Cow flaps?
Cow flaps. Nice job. So try and keep it cool. And then the next thing is, as you go through this, it's an emergency. You've lost engine power. You've lost some engine power. Is watch your engine instruments. Because now my next concern is, why did that turbocharger fail? Was it overheated, overstressed, spun too fast? Because the next concern is a fire. A fire is a whole different animal, and that's land as soon as possible. Get down, land in a field. I don't care. You got to get the airplane on the ground.
Right.
Okay. Questions on that?
No.
A lot of aircraft that have turbos will have a emergency section that talks to turbocharger or supercharger failure. So POH is going to be your friend there, but having that general knowledge of what do? You've lost some engine power. Is it a land as soon as possible? I need to dive straight for the runway? Not necessarily. But you have gone back to just a normally aspirated engine. And if there's damage there, you won't know it until you get on deck and somebody checks in terms of maintenance. So going through those is kind of your key to success there. Questions on that?
No, and it's interesting you say that because I've gone back to a normally aspirated engine because my response to the overheating is exactly the same as it would have been for a normally aspirated engine.
Exactly. It's just got a toasty engine. Maybe you suspect some damage, but now it's, hey, fly the airplane, aviate. Let's get pointed towards near suitable field. I don't need to. It's not a, hey, let's land in a field. If you have engine power and you're maintaining that, that's good. But hey, advise ATC. Hey, we're declaring an emergency, partial loss of power, and then have them help you out to a logical conclusion. All right. With that said, I'm going to bring up one thing I believe we covered in the ground school, but I want to just make sure I understand correctly. Have you heard the difference between turbocharged and turbo normalized engines?
Yeah, and I don't really understand it.
So, turbo normalized means it's using a turbo to bring the pressure in the cylinders to normal. What is normal? That's standard atmospheric pressure, 29.92 inches of mercury. So it's using the wastegate. And some of those systems, it's automatic. Some use a solenoid, some use a piston. Whatever it is, it really depends on what model of turbo you use. It's going to squeeze only enough air to maintain sea level pressure. So you go full throttle, you're going to see on the manifold pressure gauge about 30 inches. You climb up to 10,000 feet, about 30 inches. 15,000 feet, about 30 inches. Critical altitude, 30 inches, and now it's going to start to go down. That's normalized. Turbocharged or boosted is another term you would hear. It's going to squeeze even more air into the cylinders beyond 30 inches. You might see 35, 40 inches of manifold pressure. You think like big cylinders, you're squeezing even more air in than you would have at sea level. That's the difference between the two. Does that answer your question on that?
Kind of. It'll just take time. I'm just digesting it as I get it.
Takeaway with that is the black square analog, as an example, is turbo normalized. So you at full takeoff power are only going to see 30 inches. Why? Because as you are squeezing air into those cylinders, eventually that wastegate is going to sense, whoa, I need to back off some of this exhaust gas. And so it automatically opens that wastegate a bit more to dump some of that exhaust gas over, because you don't want to overboost the engine. You don't want to overpressurize those cylinders. So it's going to manage that. Some systems are automatic, others are not. Where this can present a problem is when you're on takeoff, and we talked about it. You've demonstrated that quite nicely. When you're setting takeoff power in a turbocharged engine, you go take your throttle, you push it to about the halfway position, and then slowly walk it forward, because you don't want to accidentally overboost. That wastegate takes a time, maybe a fraction of a second, just a little bit, but it does take some time. So if you firewall the engine and just blast it towards the firewall, your throttle, that might not catch in time, and you could potentially overpressurize the cylinders. Questions on that?
No.
Okay, so that covers turbo failures. Let's talk hypoxia. When you're in a turbocharged airplane, you can go above altitudes where hypoxia is going to become a factor.
Mm-hmm.
So first question comes to, what is hypoxia?
That's when you're not getting enough oxygen into your body.
That's right. Do you know the 4 types of hypoxia?
No.
All right, so first it's hypoxic or anoxic. You're just not getting enough oxygen to your brain or your organs. So your body's going to start to shut down. So that's the first type. The next one is hypemic. It's your blood cells, your red blood cells, cannot carry the oxygen to your body. Big cause for that is carbon monoxide, something else that's affecting your blood and its ability to carry oxygen. So that's type 2. Type 3, that's histotoxic. If you drink before flying, never do it, but if you did, it's going to affect your body's ability to absorb oxygen. So it's in your blood, it's getting around just fine, but your cells aren't using it efficiently. And that's going to affect, among many different things, your judgment and your ability to react and make decisions. And then the last one's stagnant. For me, in a fighter world, that's where the blood just can't reach the organs in your body, specifically your brain, because that's a big concern. Think of it as if you pulled high G's, all your blood's going to pool in the bottom of your body and away from your head. Stagnant hypoxia. All right. Questions on that?
Probably the 2 that I'd be most likely to be dealing with as a private pilot would be the first 2. Right?
That's right. So carbon monoxide, that's a big threat, especially this time of year where everybody's got cabin heat. How is that done? That's with a shroud around the exhaust that heats that air. But hey, if you got a crack in that system, you might get engine exhaust or carbon monoxide into the cabin. It's colorless, it's odorless, it's tasteless, but you're going to feel it. It's not going to feel good. And if you suspect that, that's where, hey, I need to declare an emergency. I need to land as soon as possible. I need to get as much ventilation into the cabin as possible, fresh air, to try and stave off those symptoms. All right. This one is more applicable to the United States. I imagine Transport Canada says a similar thing. When it comes to when do you need supplemental oxygen, because it's going to stave off that first type. The higher you go, there's less oxygen available around your body. The percent oxygen in the atmosphere doesn't change. It's about 20% all the way up to space. However, the amount that's actually available to you is going to drop. Why? Because the pressure's dropped. So with all that said, as that pressure is dropping, you're going to need oxygen. Do you know what altitude that requirement starts to apply to you?
12,500?
12,500 or above 12,500?
Above 12,500.
Nice job. That's a common trick by examiners. So the reg says above. So 12,500? Nope. 12,501? Yes. But do you know for how long and who needs it?
Well, that's the flight crew needs to be provided with oxygen if they're up there for more than 30 minutes.
Nice job. That's correct. And then what's the next altitude where oxygen rules are going to start to play?
It would be the next one is 14,000, and the one
14.
above that's 15,000.
What happens at 14,001 feet?
They have to have oxygen for the entire flight time above that.
Who does?
The crew.
The crew. That's right. And then above 15,000?
Well, that's when if you have a passenger, you'd provide them with supplemental oxygen.
That's right. Nice job. So everybody on board's got to have it. Big takeaway though with that is that's for unpressurized aircraft, like your GA aircraft. When you get your high performance, when you come back to me and ask for your high altitude endorsement, because that's a different set of lessons, we'll go jump in a different airplane that has the capacity to get up there, and then I'll give you the ropes for that. But that's really it for the rules and the regs. And then the last one is, how do you recognize that you're hypoxic?
You start to look Cyanotic.
Yep. So cyanosis. Where on your body, because you're flying, right? Where on your body can you look and see? Hey, am I cyanotic?
Your skin and lips.
Yep. Can't see your lips, obviously, if you're flying solo. But hey, if you've got passenger, hey, do I look kind of blue in the face or blue in the lips? Hey, yeah, I think you do. The other one, this is a great trick. Look at your left hand right now. Take your thumb and squeeze or press on the bed of your nail on your middle finger. See how the blood like very quickly comes back and rushes to fill your nail bed? So if you start to see blue around your fingertips, if you press on your nail bed on one of your fingers, and that takes a long time to fill back with fresh blood, that's another indication. Questions on that?
No, that's really good, because often you're flying solo, so knowing that about the fingernail is really good to know.
Yep. And then the next one is, hey, everybody's symptoms are unique. So yours are going to be different from mine. Knowing yours is key. Mission Canada's put plenty or potentially some chambers that you can use to test that, but everybody's symptoms are unique. If you ever go hiking, if you go climb above 10,000 feet, you're doing a lot of work. Try and get a sense of, hey, how's your body reacting to the reduced oxygen? And that might give you some clues outside of a flying environment with how your body's going to react to hypoxia. All right, questions on that?
No.
All right, so we covered turbo. We covered hypoxia. Let's talk flaps, because that's part of the complex aircraft. So can you think of a couple different examples of where your flaps could fail?
They could fail if I'm extending them at too high of a speed.
Okay, we call that blown flaps.
Right. And
yep. So key to avoid that is don't extend the flaps past their limitations. So that's one. There's a couple different ways that you could see that. The flaps could accidentally, they could be forced up, like those hinges could fail, and then suddenly those flaps streamline. You'll probably feel a significant reduction of lift initially, and then you're going to transition to a no flap landing.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one. What's another one?
The other one is if I'm in a slip and I've got the flaps extended and I'm in the slip for too long of a period of time, because of the unequal forces on each side of the wing, I could end up having a flap damage, so it might be extended and I might not be able to retract it.
So that one's aircraft dependent. Some aircraft say, hey, you should avoid doing slips with flaps extended. Others don't.
Yeah.
If it's not placarded,
right.
Biggest thing is go up with an instructor, somebody who has tried that, and
right.
get what their perspective is on it.
I think the Bonanza is 30 seconds.
Gotcha. If it's a specific second limitation, then you've got that as well. I know there's a start limitation for 30 seconds, but not that I've seen for flaps. But that's if it's the limit, then honor that. The other one I'm thinking of is split flaps. So let's say you're in a turn, you're on the downwind, and you start your turn to base. You're extending your flaps. Instead of if you feel the airplane really rolling, like really trying to almost overbank against you, and you're suddenly going, hey, what's going on? What's happening here? You might have the outside flap extend, but maybe the inside flap on the turn gets jammed. So now you have a split flap condition. What would you do in a situation like that where you felt the airplane starting to roll a lot faster than you wanted it to?
I think you'd try to match both flaps so that they're symmetrical.
Okay, how would you do that?
Well, if the flap was wasn't extended all the way, I'd bring the flap up that was extended to match the flap that wasn't extended.
Nice job. So that's a good one. You might hear it in aviation where if you do an action of the cockpit and it has an adverse consequence, undo it. So go back to half flaps. If you had approach flaps and you get a landing and you get the split flap condition, hey, just bring that lever back up. Let's see if maybe you can at least get some symmetry there. But let's say you don't. Let's say you try that and you end up in the split flap condition. Do we want to continue this lap around the traffic pattern?
I think you want to land.
Is it do you want to land right here? Like continue, because you're starting your turn onto, let's just say, a left base.
Right.
Still coming around the runway. Do we want to land at this point?
Well, you need to complete the base and turn final, right?
You do. I think this is an example of where you could go around. So
Okay.
you have a suspected issue with the aircraft.
Good point.
Suddenly, all of your attention is going, whoa, what is happening here?
Give yourself some time to troubleshoot it, is what you're saying.
That's right. Don't rush. This isn't a airplane's falling out of the sky. The engine's still running. You're still flying. You got to turn a lot more. But at this point, let's get away from the pattern. Let's get away from the runway. Let's climb up to altitude and let's work the problem. So some things you can do once you climb up to altitude, find a landing configuration and speed that's controllable. Because if you think about it this way, you've got split flaps, so one wing is producing significantly more whiff than the other. You've tried to fix it. You can't. I wouldn't at that point, if you've tried to fix it, I would leave the flaps as is. But now it's time for you, high up altitude, so you have room to recover if you lose control. Slow the airplane down in about 5-10 knot increments. There's 90 knots. Hey, the airplane's controllable. Try a little descent. Hey, there's 80 knots. Okay, more difficult, but still controllable. 70 knots. Okay, I have the yoke all the way over to the right, and I'm barely hanging on. Got it. 75 knots is your limit. So you're going to land fast. So even though you're landing fast, you might float a little bit, but the goal is to get the airplane on the ground safely. But you have to find a landing configuration that's safe to use. And that's how you diagnose that. Let's call it a controllability check. Because you are essentially a test pilot at this point. You have an airplane that has more flaps on one side than the other. You have to find out what landing configuration works for you. Does that make sense?
Oh, that's fantastic. That's brilliant.
Now the last one is, let's say you join the traffic pattern, you're trying to put the flaps down, and you don't really feel anything change. You know, in a real airplane, you might feel a little bit of lift in your seat, and you might feel the nose pitch forward as that pitching moment changes, but you don't feel anything. You look down and you see the flaps haven't moved. You look over to your left wing, you see the flaps haven't moved. What do we have here?
Well, you could have an electrical failure.
Could have an electrical failure. Could have it either an electrical system, could be the motor that's moving the flaps hasn't moved. But whatever it is, you diagnose it same way. Hey, I'm going to take this around. I want to see what's wrong with the airplane. So get out of the pattern. You got 5 Cessnas behind you. Let's get out of their way. Because I'm not really focused so much on the traffic pattern. Because now my attention has been diverted away to a distraction in the cockpit. So get the airplane to a safe state. But you troubleshoot and you determine, hey, I can't get the flaps down. What do we have here now?
You got a plane that you're not able to deploy the flaps.
You got a no flap landing coming up.
No problem.
Wanna come? No problem. Airplane's still flying, right? You've been flying around in cruise flight for almost an hour notionally in this case. You didn't need flaps then. But things are going to be a little different when it comes to how you land in a no flap aircraft. One, you're going to be faster. You're going to feel faster as you approach the runway. You're going to think, wow, I'm going to float really, really badly here. This is not a safe speed. But keep in mind, what happens to our stall speed? Clean versus dirty.
It'll increase.
That's right, it'll increase. So you're going to fly a little bit faster. The next one is, when it comes to extending the flaps, what does that do to our nose attitude when we're coming into land?
It'll give you better visibility on the runway because you'll be pitching down.
That's right. So your nose is going to be a lot lower. But hey, you have no flaps here. So your nose is going to be a lot higher. So you're going to feel fast, and you're going to feel like your nose is buried up into the sky. That's okay. That's a no flap landing. Mm-hmm. Biggest thing to take in mind with that is to not overcorrect for that. Still come down to the runway. You might need to lift up in your seat a little bit. For Flight Sim today, just make sure you got a keybind readily accessible to lift your seat up or lift your viewpoint up. But you're going to feel yourself parked a little hot nose high. Don't over rotate, because what we want to avoid here is potentially tail striking. And you'll see that on post-flight. When you do your walk around after you've landed, if you see that the tail tie down's been sheared or been dinged a little bit, you know you did a tail strike. Questions on that?
No.
All right. So that takes care of flap failures. Let's talk gear malfunctions. In the default Bonanza, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of options to simulate that. So we'll really talk through those, and I'll kind of have you work through a problem that I'll give you while we're flying around. So to that point, a couple different ways you can have gear fail. One, can't come down at all. So you try to extend it and it just fails entirely. Maybe it's a motor, maybe it's a hydraulic issue, but the gear's just not coming down. In the Bonanza, do we know, what are some indications that we have that the gear is down and locked?
The green lights will
Green
be lit up.
lights?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Anything else?
The lever's also down.
That's another one. What's a third one? This one's a little more based on just what do you feel?
Oh, you'd be flying slower.
You'd be flying slower. You probably hear a change in sound.
Oh, wait,
you feel the drag a little bit more.
Big change in sound. Yep. It's loud.
But if you move the lever down, and you see the lights aren't working, and you see the in-transit light, because that's the other indication we see. You see that light just stays illuminated. Right. Maybe we have the gear that's not coming down. So at this point, you're in the traffic pattern. Do we want to land?
No, we'd like to troubleshoot.
That's right. Go around. Let's climb up to altitude, troubleshoot. So first step, aviate. Let's get away from the ground. Let's find a safe piece of sky to try and work the problem. The next one is navigate. Hey, find that safe piece of sky. Communicate. If you are at a towered airport and there's a control tower, they typically have multiple people up there with binoculars. You can ask air traffic control, hey tower, this is Bonanza 540. Troubleshooting, I have no gear indications. Can you see if my gear is down? They pull up binoculars and they say, yeah, it looks like all three wheels are up, or it looks like just your nose wheel is up. So now you know kind of what to work through and what to expect. From here, it really just depends on the aircraft. So retractable gear airplanes will almost always have a checklist for emergency gear extension. And that's based on a couple of different systems, aircraft dependent. I believe for the Bonanza, it is a mechanical pump that you have, now the lever in the cockpit. Typically it's between pilot and co-pilot seat, where you manually pump or crank the gear down. Might take a couple of different times. I think in the TBM that I fly on Flight Sim, it's about 60 pushes on that handle to get the full down and locked indications. But while you're doing all this, make sure you're at a safe altitude. You're at a slower airspeed to conserve fuel, because I don't want to be at cruise power. I want to be back on the power a little bit. Safe, controllable airspeed, but not to use as much fuel, because that's going to give me more time to troubleshoot this problem. Questions on that?
Is it modeled in the Bonanza, the Asobo Bonanza?
In the Asobo Bonanza, it is not, unfortunately. As I look around in the cockpit, it looks like the emergency gear extension lever is missing.
Okay.
It's missing entirely.
Comanche has it.
Is that the A2A Comanche?
Yep.
Yep. So the payware airplanes, they put the money in, they put the hours and work in, they make it pretty. I believe the Black Square Bonanza has tried it. I haven't played with the emergency gear extension in it yet, but I believe it has it. All right, last one comes to gear malfunctions. Let's just say you can't get the gear down. Hey, fly the airplane. The insurance company paid for it now. But in terms of what you do to fly a normal traffic pattern, it's really just not going to be any different than just a normal trip around, except you're going to feel a lot less drag as you transition from downwind to base to final. And when you touch down, a couple things are going to happen. One, you're going to have a prop strike. It's going to be loud, it's going to be quick, and then the engine's going to stop. You're also going to probably feel that the airplane slows down a lot faster. Why? Because you're scraping the belly along the runway. So your landing distance is going to shrink pretty drastically. The last one is, and this is a real world consideration, not so much for flight sim, it's a lot shorter of a step getting out of the airplane when the wheels are sucked up. So don't ding your head on the cowling of the flap, especially if you're in a high wing like a Cessna RG. Don't hit your head.
That's important, I know from being in a truck accident one time, if you ever find yourself upside down off the side of the road in your truck, before you undo your seatbelt, put your hand over your head so that you can take the pressure, because you're going to fall into the ceiling on your head.
That's right. Let's see here. That really covers gear malfunctions in a nutshell. So